So, I saw the Artemis Fowl movie, and it was quite awful. But there are some ways this movie could have been not awful. It might have still been a train wreck, just not the kind that explodes when the train hits the ground. I should remind you, I have not read the books. I do not care about the books. I'm just looking at the movie we got and how it could have been improved a little. Before I get into what I would have done different, I should talk about what the movie did do. There's this thing called the Aculus. It is a fairy artifact/weapon. It is missing. One evil fairy named Opal kidnaps Artemis Fowl Sr. and tells Artemis Fowl Jr. he can have his dad back in exchange for the Aculus. Artemis Fowl Jr. kidnaps a fairy, bringing the entire fairy police department to his house where he manipulates them into sending a dwarf inside because dwarves are excellent lockpicks. The dwarf picks a safe and the Aculus is inside. They use the Aculus to bring Artemis Sr. back to the house, at which point father and son decide to go to war with Opal. That might sound complicated, but that's about as simplified as I could make it, as it makes even less sense when watching the movie. This movie was heavily edited down to the final product. Director Kenneth Branagh said he didn't want a criminal mastermind as the main character, as he is in the books, as he thought audiences would have trouble relating to that protagonist. But if that's the case, you would think he would have thought of that before production on the movie began. But it's clear a movie was made, then it was edited into a different movie. There's a deleted scene where Artemis is willing to allow a fairy to burn alive unless she gives him a book which will lead him to some gold. That scene does not factor into the movie, as he is not looking for gold in the movie. It seems like Criminal Mastermind was on the table well into production before somebody changed their mind. Let's segue seamlessly into the first thing I would have done differently. Don't water down Artemis Fowl. Again, I have not read the books, but Criminal Mastermind sounds much more interesting than whatever this movie did. I don't blame Ferdy Shaw. I feel bad for him, as this is his only acting credit as of recording this video, and I don't think anyone's first acting credit should be this movie. I think the kid can pull off the smarmy Bond villain thing that Branagh was shying away from. It's not his fault the main character is so uninteresting. Early in the movie, it comes up that Artemis thinks he's better than his peers. Then we see him surfing, and he falls off the surfboard. I thought this was going to be an interesting character trait. He's a prodigy, so he seeks out things that he's not good at so he can experience failure. He wants to be bad at stuff like normal humans. Then you can have an actual reason why this bodyguard is here. Artemis might not be good at shooting elf guns, and in warfare, he needs someone who is good at that to have his back. I thought this would be a pretty interesting character dynamic, but no, they don't do anything like that. Why does Branagh think people who haven't read the books would not accept a kid Bond villain as the main character? We had television shows like Breaking Bad, Dexter, and Weeds, all lasting 5 or more seasons. Sure, those are meant for the big boys and girls, but you can do what those shows did for kids. Give us a criminal who we sympathize with. Dexter was raised to be a weapon pointed and fired at the serial killer community. Got it. Walter has cancer and wants to support his family with meth distribution. Got it. Nancy's family is in debt, so she sells weed to support them. Got it. You might not like what these characters do, but you understand why they are doing it. Do that with Artemis. Say his dad was kidnapped before the movie begins, and he's doing some pretty nasty stuff like almost letting a fairy burn alive so he can find his dad. I love a villain with some kind of nice quality to them, which would go a long way to helping audiences accept Artemis as a villain protagonist. You know what else would help audiences with that? Giving us a villain who is much worse than Artemis. We only get like 2 scenes with the bad guy of this movie, and both of them are her talking to Artemis on the phone. Yeah, frightening. Sure, she kidnapped Artemis's dad, off screen though. We never get an idea of what she's capable of. If she's supposed to be mysterious and we find out more about her over the course of the entire series of books, that's fine. Look at the Harry Potter series, which I'm sure you were anyway, Lockhart. The first Harry Potter movie gives Voldemort the appropriate weight, even though we don't find out much about him. He killed Harry's parents. He was once a student at Hogwarts. That's about it. But he still feels like a threat, even in that first movie. I can't say that about Opal what's-her-name. I can't say much of anything about Opal, really. Why does she want the Aculus? To start a war with humanity because of a previous war with humanity. Was Opal alive during that war? Who won that war? If it was the humans, how did the fairies manage to lose when they had the ability to wipe the memories of the entire species who does not believe that the fairies exist in the present day? And if the humans lost and therefore had their memories wiped so they don't believe fairies exist, then why does Opal want to start another war with them? She says humans and fairies cannot be friends. So was she betrayed by a human she once considered a friend? Was it one of the Fowl family? Commander Root says she's been dealing with the Fowls for generations. Does Opal realize Artemis and Holly are friends by the end of the movie, thus disproving the entire crux of her supervillain thesis? Voldemort wanting to take over the world is pretty basic, but at least I'm not making myself dizzy trying to figure out what he wants or why. The next thing's gonna seem kinda hypocritical based on my general positive thoughts on the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Several of those movies movies were built around all-powerful stones that, when joined together, could alter time and space. In this movie, we have the Aculus. We are told it's a weapon so powerful and mysterious it can barely be imagined. In the wrong hands, it would mean access to the greatest spells in fairy lore. It can open portals between worlds, a skeleton key for the whole universe. They're just throwing vague descriptives at this thing so that it can do whatever the plot needs it to. With the Infinity Stones, there's a kind of consistency. When a normal dude grabs one, it burns you up. Even with something that can change the rules, there's a set of rules that let me know what can and can't happen. I don't have that with the Aculus. I have no idea what this thing can do. So when Artemis's friend Butler is at death's door, I honestly thought they were going to use the Aculus to bring him to life. Doesn't make any sense, was not seated earlier in the movie as Chekhov's gun always should be, so it makes sense that this movie would do that. They didn't. Holly used her magic to revive him, but then she uses the Aculus to bring Artemis's father back home safely. I guess portal between worlds, this kind of makes sense, but it feels like if the movie needed Artemis to grow wings and fly, the Aculus could make that happen. Give me some basic rules for this thing and for this world, and then follow those rules. There's more stuff I could complain about, like extraneous characters who probably were a big deal in the books, but don't offer much in this story, or extraneous scenes that pad out the movie so that halfway in, all that's happened is a light case of fairy kidnapping. Some of these things I suggested are kind of small, some would be a little more radical, but all of this stuff contributed to the movie being a steaming pile, which is a shame because even though I've never been a fan of this character or series, I think I could have really liked this movie if it had followed through on some of the stuff I suggested. But what do you guys think? Let me know and be sure to check me out in the future as I talk about other stuff. Until then, have a good one.